Well, yes, as I said, it has, and I'm sure you agree, been a gripping week in the trial of Oscar Pistorius. Obviously, Oscar back in the dock, facing the onslaught of Advocate Gerrie Nel. His prosecution has been brutal. He has pulled no punches, pushing Oscar Pistorius to take responsibility for his actions, and doing so in a brutal fashion. But to set the scene, let's now touch base with courtside.
Why would you create a spectacle in court, in the public domain, in the public eye, apologize, and not in private? You never thought about them. You never thought how they would feel, sitting in the public gallery of a court whilst you make an apology. Did you think how they would experience that, or did it only matter about Pistorius? You're sorry that you have to think of them. You're sorry for their pain and sorrow, but you're not sorry that you killed their daughter. It's not in there.
I'm terribly sorry that I took the life of their daughter, my lady.
Now you say that.
Well, the emotion in Oscar Pistorius' voice tells its own tale, but some very, very harsh words from Gerrie Nel during his testimony with us in studio to take an inside look, and I'm sure he is as enthralled with the trial this week. It really has taken a new turn. Is clinical psychologist Abraham Leroux. Abraham, thank you so much for joining us this morning. When we look at what clearly are shock tactics meant to rattle Oscar, what could be Gerrie Nel's purpose in taking this line now in opening his cross-examination of Oscar?
What he's doing is that if we get the emotional brain to actually really being flooded, then what you start seeing is a kind of a trigger. And there's a trip switch that actually switches off the thinking part of the brain. So you stop to think, and then what then starts happening, it becomes very difficult to lie. So he's clearly trying to actually get him away from kind of potential lies, or kind of get him specifically away from rehearsed kind of answers.
Has he flicked that switch in your mind from what you are hearing in his voice and picking up?
Well, it's always very interesting to listen to the kind of answers that a person is giving to these kind of questions. And what you could hear is that you can always spot like a rehearsed answer, because it doesn't really relate to the question. So obviously, Oscar's defense doesn't want him to actually get that trip going. But obviously, when he goes into emotional state, then he would actually go into a defense and then potentially tell more the truth as it has happened.
You know, so much of the direction at the moment seems to be trying to establish Oscar's state of mind at that fateful moment, and obviously get an understanding of what could have forced the reaction that led to the shooting. What do you think, in your mind, picking up on what you've heard and the testimony, what was going through his head at that moment?
See, relating to what I've just said about the fact that there's a trigger, and when that trip switch goes, then he stopped thinking, as he actually mentioned himself. Now, it's what they need to determine is, was it because of his fear of an intruder, or his anger towards Reva, or whatever actually stopped him to think at that specific moment in time. What then happens is that he went into kind of an emotional defense, and that actually set off the whole next set of events.
Now, you know, a lot of the preamble to this has been Oscar's experience with crime, his father's hijacking, the fact that there has been a relationship to violence, or that he has been exposed to it in the past. How would that have preloaded his mind, or his actions in that moment, it presented with an intruder, if that is indeed what he was believing at the time?
Well, definitely, when we had previous trauma of an incident, then that becomes a memory that we're going to actually react to. Now, we have an immune system that actually reacts against kind of virus and bacteria, killing them off. But we also have a psychological immune system, and that's our aggression. So when we feel attacked on any level, doesn't matter if it's anger or kind of fear, we're going to react, and depending on how severe the trauma was of the past and how we feel that the present situation is dangerous, it's going to affect how effective or violent we're going to react.
So is it plausible that you would, for instance, fire a gun purely on instinct if the degree of violence that you've experienced in the past has been that severe?
Oh, most definitely, because when I was a psychologist working in Pollsmoor, most of the violent crimes happened in this kind of impulsive sense. The person stopped thinking because they were so overwhelmed by what was happening, and then go into auto mode, and that becomes extremely dangerous depending on how they perceive the situation, and obviously previous trauma as well.
I think one area that has got all of us really thinking is the fact that Oscar, of course, is working from a standpoint that few of us can relate to. The fact that he does have a double amputation. This does put him physically at a disadvantage in that situation. How would that affect his psyche? Should we be judging him differently to a person that would be fully physically able?
It will definitely have an impact, because to have a double amputee at such a young age would have actually created a severe castration fear. Now, psychologically, what that means is there would be an injury to his sense of masculinity. So, and if he was bullied as a child because of that, that would actually increase that injury. So when anybody in any ways attack in his perception his masculinity, he will potentially react with a lot of aggression and even potentially violent behavior.
We're going to get into the psychology of their relationship, and I'm guessing that also has a bearing on his relationship with Reva as well, and we're going to get into those details in just a moment. Oram, thank you so much for joining us. This really is incredibly interesting. We have to really recommend that you pick up the story on sabcnews.com or .co.za if you want more of the details. Educate yourself. We're going to be continuing our in-depth discussion around the Oscar Pistorius trial this morning. So many details to discuss. We'd love to know what you are thinking on our Facebook page. We're going to take a quick break. We'll see you just now.